Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Clee Stamos from GearWorks.com and the E2KG Network channel on YouTube, home of several joyous podcasts. Two covering games, one covering entertainment. This series, It's Another Thing. This is episode number 6, and here with me, as always, is my faithful and stalwart companion, Mr. Dave Pecci. Dave, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you, man?
Excelente. So, as always, we are a ongoing podcast that covers what we call a short season format television predominantly. So things such as series that drop on Netflix, all the Marvel shows. But tonight we are here to discuss one that is airing on Freeform TV, formerly the ABC Family Channel, Cloak and Dagger, which has become surprisingly popular during this summer run of this off-season kind of quirky Marvel show. I'm quite happy. Cloak and Dagger were a childhood thing for me coming up when I started collecting comics. So I was very appreciative that it just got on the air at all. But I was also kind of very curious on how it was going to turn out because these are not like it's not Spider-Man or even Daredevil or the X-Men or anything of that nature. So tonight we are discussing episodes number 5 and 6, entitled Princeton Offense. That was number 5, and episode number 6, Funhouse Mirrors. I'm a bit discombobulated because.
When did you watch them, by the way? Because I watched both back to back today.
As did I, which is more typically my norm. So because.
Okay.
A lot of times when we watch them early, then sometimes it's a while before we can record, and my memory definitely gets fuzzy. So that's good. Great to hear. So Dave, why don't you go ahead and give some overall impressions of episodes 5 and 6 while I try and get the social media out.
Yeah, so I kind of looked at some of the reviews, and I was kind of shocked that some people did not. I think it was episode 5 at least didn't rate very well. And I felt like episode 5 started off very slowly. But I feel overall these were very good, kind of more exciting episodes. We don't fully see Cloak and Dagger on yet, but like you were telling me, like I didn't realize that Cloak eventually is corporeal, and it definitely seems like they're sticking kind of to the comic, and there was kind of a foreshadow that that's what was coming, was that he was going to possibly die. But what was really cool is we actually got to see Cloak actually master his abilities more so. We got to see a lot more of kind of the plot coming out, some heartfelt moments. And I just I like the whole, like, the other thing I really am enjoying too is that the way that they're dealing with kind of romance in this. Like, I feel like a lot of shows, especially the Netflix ones, like they have romance in there for the sake of romance. But I feel like the romance in here, it kind of has a point. Like if you're somebody's girlfriend, it's like you're not just their girlfriend, but you're kind of like their sidekick, and you're kind of telling their side of the story as well. And I kind of like how they're playing that out. And I still really like how we're in New Orleans. They went to a swamp. Although I kind of I'm not a southern person. I've only been to Florida, so I don't really know like the South. But I expect like you don't usually walk around a swamp and like there be no gators or anything out to get you. So I was just kind of like, is that kind of real? But overall, it still has me hooked on the show, and I'm still really looking forward to see what we're going to see. I think in the last 2 episodes now, right? 7 and 8, and I think that's it.
Yeah, I'm not entirely positive, but I'll fact check that while you're finishing up your comments.
Yeah. So the other thing that I guess I'll throw out, which we can discuss and get your feelings on later, is that the female cop is actually from Harlem, which is kind of cool because we know another superhero that is from Harlem, Luke Cage.
Well, and of course, maybe even more importantly, his former police officer friend, right, who probably I would expect knows this cop.
Misty Knight.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of like, are they gonna like connect Luke Cage in this somehow? Oh, and there's 10. Sorry, so we have 7, 8, and then 9 and 10. So 2 more episodes for for this podcast series. Yeah, so we have Lotus Eaters and Ghost Stories will be next, and then Backbreaker and Colony Collapse. Which is kind of interesting. Like, I guess I feel like at least for this season, we're going to be remaining in New Orleans. So it'll be interesting to see if season 2 continues in New Orleans or if we're going to move to New York City. But I honestly like it. You know, all the superheroes shouldn't be centered around like New York City. I honestly think. I think it's cool to have some diversity. Very much with how Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, we've seen them in LA and they do a lot of traveling because Ghost Rider's in LA, which is an interesting thing that they did.
Yeah, but of course, you know, it's, I don't know. So I guess I'm a purist to a certain extent, and like as I mentioned before, you know, my hope is that we eventually see Cloak and Dagger in New York. It would be very interesting and fitting, and I've been suspecting that the case will be that that they'll end their story in New Orleans and move to New York, which could make things interesting. Could actually invoke a move of Emma Lahana character, Detective Bridget O'Reilly. Emma Lahana, also previously the Yellow Power Ranger in one iteration of the Power Rangers. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about you know, well, let's go ahead and summarize what happened in these episodes. So, in Princeton Offense, which is predominantly about the big championship game, basketball game for Tyrone, you know, all of it is about working up to get him to the game. He's got some great scenes with Gloria Reuben, who plays his mother. But in the meantime, Tandy is continuing her own investigation of the Roxxon Corporation. And in one of her Vision Quest jaunts surfaces, by the way, this show is a spoiler cast. So,
Yeah, there we go. Yep.
if you're not familiar with our format and you don't get it and you don't know, we are going to discuss details of the show, assuming that you have already watched the episode and you've come here to participate in a more detailed discussion in evaluating its entertainment value and kind of what they're doing with the plot and show.
And we do welcome comments if anybody ever wants to chime in.
Yeah, comments, Twitter comments, Facebook posts, wherever you see us. I was about to make a controversial comment about people who post things publicly on social media and then get offended when people actually respond to them. But I won't get into that. That's a gaming topic, not an entertainment topic. But yeah, so yeah, if we post it, by all means, you know, feel free to participate with us in the conversation there. We are not experts. We're just people who try and start a conversation about things that we like. So,
Yep.
so where was I? So yeah, so Tandy is continuing to try to pull the thread on, you know, what happened with her father, and in one of her vision quests, obtains the name of Ivan Hess, who was another engineer who worked with her father. She doesn't figure that out this episode. I think that actually happens in episode 6, but she does determine that Ivan Hess's daughter works for Roxxon, and concocts a plan to try and get close to her. In this episode, you know, Tyrone goes through a lot of strain points, I would call them, with his social contacts. So with members of his team who beat him up in a locker, and then now, like, I was really offended. Like now, like they're like, hey, so that worked, right? So we're all cool, right? I mean, you've been on point at practice since then, so clearly you understand what we were trying to get. I'm like, no, dude, that's not cool. So there's that. He establishes contact with Detective O'Reilly and starts seeing if he can get her involved in the takedown of Connors.
Yep.
And so the two of them start a relationship. And also, at this point, Ty is starting to figure out that his brother Billy's old friend, Marvin, is not Marvin or Martin. I'm not sure which it is.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Is not entirely on the up and up, and actually may have had something to do with Billy's death, and definitely is potentially involved with Officer Connors as well. So probably the most interesting thing to me in this whole show is and I'll mention, where the episode ends up is probably was probably the internet joke the week that this episode aired, which is the fact that Tyrone shows up crying in Tandy's church. And Tandy is unable to comfort him because she can't touch him. Now the joke,
is that the end of 8 or end of 7? That's the end of 8, right?
That was the end
of
6. I thought it was the end of 5. You're right. It's in episode 6. So we'll come back to that.
Okay, yeah. So I want to ask you a big question that revolved around episode 5. Do you think the girlfriend knows that he's got these powers of his, and do you think she knew that he knew that him not making that final shot would impact those two people's lives? Or did she say that kind of as an offhand kind of, oh, you made a good decision? Like, do you think she knew? Do you think she knows like what's going on right now, or do you think she's kind of like, oh, she's just saying that?
Yeah,
like,
are you talking about Evita?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's also mention there that also in this episode we get the, I don't know, I won't call it. We get a closer approach between Ty and Evita, where Ty kind of stops being as stupid as boys are at that age, and finally figures out that she does actually like him and gives her his Letterman's jacket, one of the most classic high school movie maneuvers in the world. I personally, we can go ahead and talk about episodes 5 and 6, having seen both of them. She indicates in episode 6, I thought, that she does understand why he threw that shot away, and that she knows that ref was either on the take, or was a racist and didn't want an inner city urban high school that was predominantly African American to win the championship. So I think she knows exactly why he did it, and was cool with it.
But she kind of knows why, but not how he knew.
Right.
How he knew. Yeah, because he touched them and he saw the thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that. Well, when he touched that guy, I think what he saw was that guy was abused as a kid. I think it was his own natural intuition and instinct that, and just observation that caused him to, understand that the guy was trying to, throw the game away from the inner city high school.
Well, I think he touched the referee too, and I think that's when Tandy saw part of his vision, because the referee was talking about leading some sort of interns or something like that.
Okay, all right. So I don't think that Evita knows that he has powers. I think she knows, before she sits down and does the whole thing with her mother. I think she knew beforehand that there was something special about Ty. I don't think she had any knowledge that he was half of the what do they call them? The divine
pair, something, right?
The divine pair or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she knows that until her mother talks to her about it. But I think she knows that there's something about him that is, beyond the norm. So other things from episode 5, right? Trying to think of this through relationships. So, one of the things that I continue to find interesting is, we continue to have this relationship between Cloak and Dagger. I think, I guess it's in the next. There's so many things I guess that happen and come to fruition in episode 6. I will say, probably the standout moment in this episode for me was the scene once again between Aubrey Joseph and Gloria Reuben, where they are talking about how much Ty misses Billy, and wishing, both of them talking about, how would Billy think of Ty if he were here. and Ty saying that Billy was twice the basketball player that he was, and his mom being hyper detailed about the nuances and details in evaluation of basketball players, and talks about how Billy had great D, but Ty has stronger legs and a much better jump shot. And I thought that was wonderfully poignant in representing like a mom who, like, because her kid loves something and she wants to support it, has gone off and become like a subject matter expert and kind of sports commentator, right, on the topic of basketball. So I thought that scene was awesome. Any other major relationships or kind of scenes that stood out for you in this episode?
Yeah, I really like the scene where Tandy pushed him over the edge where he fell in the water. Like, well, you got to learn sometimes. She just, she like gives him that near death experience, and that kind of activates his ability to go back to where he was. And I'm really liking this. Go on.
And I was actually there because there's a momentary pause when that happens. Nice touch of cinematography, by the way. And the whole time I'm thinking, Ty, of the two of them, Tandy comes off as the street smart kid, and Ty comes off as the lunkhead. So when she pushes it, I'm half thinking that didn't work. Ty's just going to come up out of the pool. I was
actually thinking that too because of the cinematography, right?
Right.
Because you see the splash of water, but you don't necessarily see okay, is he coming back up out of that water? Like there's that kind of break, a moment. Okay, and then they show where he's back there, right? So it's kind of that woof. Because then that would be really bad, right? Like that would be a game changer. Like, oh shoot, this is a big, event. Random dude just pops out of nowhere.
Right. So I'll also say in this episode, so this is the point where I am tired, right? And I know this is why I hate origin stories to a certain extent. Although I do have to do a loop back on that because I was thinking this week about how I pretty much maintain a very consistent stance that I hate origin stories for characters that we should feel confident and comfortable at this point that the world knows, right? We don't need to see the Bruce Wayne, origin anymore. We don't need to see the destruction of Krypton. I caught myself a little bit, though, because I thought about how much the world, and in particular, this gets, again, into a gaming topic with the streaming community, how the streaming community is all about their personal egos. And I was like, man, maybe people do need to see that Uncle Ben scene one more time, right? And sees what happens when, you have a lot of influence and you choose to aggrandize yourself and not look out for other people. But this is a necessary origin story. But I'm starting to have that same feeling that I had even with the Green Hornet and Kato movie with Seth Rogen. And my big problem with that movie is I thought it was a pretty good movie, but they spend 90% of the time figuring out how to be the Green Hornet and Kato. And at the 1.5 hour point, 1 hour 20-minute point, I'm frustrated. I'm like, I get it, right? You guys are agonizing. Get over it and become heroes. And I'm kind of at that point with Cloak. Initially, when they had Dagger, learn to control her powers first, I thought, okay, that's cool. That now we've got bevels, right? Now they're not equal anymore. But now I'm like, okay, Ty, you've had enough time, right? You're 2 episodes late, right? Let's get with it. Because again, in the comics, Ty, and maybe they're doing it because he needs to come through a certain journey, and he, between the two of them, Tandy's a tragic character too, but I guess I just always felt like Cloak got the crappier end of the deal, right? He was the one who couldn't touch anybody and couldn't really date anyone.
Yeah, apparently he dies, right? So yeah,
I don't know exactly how they're going to play that. I don't remember that specifically from the comics. That could have happened. That could have been a breakdown in an origin flashback that I missed. I don't remember him being dead. I do just remember him. I feel like I remember him being non-corporeal. But yeah,
I'm thinking if he's non-corporeal, that means he must have died, right?
I mean, yeah, it's not illogical. It's like I said, I just don't remember a specific canon, that would link back to that. But yeah, I can definitely see him having the near-death experience and then being transformed through it. Absolutely. So no, I was about to say another episode 6 thing. So, So one thing that struck me in this episode, I believe we had the yeah. So we have the car scene, right, in episode 5, where you have Detective O'Reilly. You know, since she appeared, there has been a patrol officer that keeps popping into the background, right, with her handing him coffee and him handing her coffee. We finally kind of get the reveal this episode that they're in a relationship, a physical relationship.
Yeah.
And we get a scene of that in the police car. And I'm like, I don't really
I think we needed to see that.
Yeah, it's like doesn't add anything to her character for me, and I definitely felt it was gratuitous. So, to the point where it just kind of stuck out and struck me as such, right?
Right. It's not like when we had Punisher, right? Where, gosh, I'm blinking on her name.
Yeah,
Medina, right?
Yeah, Billy and Dina.
Yeah,
yeah,
where they had it, and it only made it stronger because, like, Billy used her, so it's like,
right.
Oh, it just made him more of a jerk. Like, there was some point in that. Like, I don't see like, why are we giving them so much attention at all? You know, like, the fact that, right? I mean, it just makes me like, can we focus on Cloak and Dagger or somebody else?
Well, there is a little bit of him being a little more streetwise to the New Orleans scene than she is in the precinct, and him trying to warn her off of trying to take down a vice unit cop who's a UC. So I kind of get that part. You were kind of starting to get the hint that they were in a romantic relationship. I just don't know that I needed to see it. Consummated, on screen, and it wasn't. This is on Freeform TV. This is another thing that causes me to not quite understand how this is ABC Family TV with that scene. Yeah, I just felt it was kind of unnecessary and didn't really lend a lot to the story. And I don't really like her being. I don't know. There's a piece of me that doesn't like her being overly humanized. Like, I really, more than anything, I love that first episode and a half where all of her scenes are entirely silent. Because it kind of evoked that feeling that you get when you see silent panels in a comic. And silent panels in a comic are typically only really effective if they're strung together, kind of in small numbers. So incidentally, that also brings us to another topic. There's a scene in this episode as well where Detective O'Reilly finds, I can't remember the old boyfriend's name, who has basically gone to jail for Tandy.
Right, we get to see him again, which was kind of neat.
Yeah, and understand that he knows a little bit about the drug scene at some of the clubs that he popularized. But we also get to hear a couple lines of his feelings for Tandy, and he feels like she has burned him and has lied to him, but he's also still not willing to give her up.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting. I wonder, at a certain point, I don't know what they're going to do with that guy. I could see he winds up becoming a villain and comes back to seek revenge. He would kind of be one of those weird characters that would just fade away into the background, I think, normally, and we would just never hear from again. So I felt it was a little kind of weird to have him pop up back in this episode. But it's also equally weird for him to have just wandered off the face of the earth and never be referred to again.
Yeah.
So there we go. And obviously during the scene we get several flashbacks. We kind of glossed over that because they're now kind of packaged up, and we know that that's how she gets the name of Peter Scarborough. So she finds the person who at least partially would have been in the decision-making chain of leaving her dad out to hang and dry. She goes to a Roxanne evening party and lays hands on some of the VPs who are all kind of complete chads, and all of them are having images of this guy Peter Scarborough and hate him apparently. I guess he's kind of like a hated boss, and so you work for him and you have to impress him, but you would also love for the day where he, dies, gets promoted, or gets caught in a scandal so you can replace him. So
Which
Yeah.
which reminds me of that big scene where she finally meets the dude, and she's about to strike him down, but she's like, well, maybe the smart thing would be actually to find out more about what's going on. And lo and behold, she gets this gnarly vision of all these dead bodies and him taking the money, from this event to a private island and making sure that nobody rats him out for, him being the cause of this issue.
Right, and of course at the tail end of that is when we get the name of Ivan Hess.
Yes.
So let's go ahead on to episode 6, Funhouse Mirrors, so we can stop kind of script checking ourselves every time we want to talk about something that actually happened in this episode. So the episode opens, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, with I guess maybe it's the end of the episode where Evita sneaks into his room, or maybe it's the beginning of this episode,
right.
And they have their nightly sleepover, and we get a couple tidbits revealed about their relationship, about how she pays attention to him and she notices what's going on with him, and she's not just oblivious, and she gets why he threw the game. But also in this, we get some scenes unfolding later of things between Evita and her mother, with her mother becoming concerned that the appearance of or the arrival of Cloak and Dagger is indicative that something bad is about to go down in New Orleans.
And I think that we're probably seeing episode 9 or 10, because episode 10 is called Colony Collapse, which I'm guessing is kind of referring to the colony style, New Orleans. So.
Yep.
And then the other thing too, going back to the episode 5 vision. So was it just he had money right in there too? I feel like there was like some hidden other stuff. But never mind.
Yeah. No. So yes, it's that. So the scene with Scarborough, bodies are popping up out of the water, the mud, if you will. And he's reaching inside, and they're all apparently bodies who worked out on an oil rig, or, there's probably more than one in Roxon. That's probably not the only tragedy that they've had. But he's also reaching in and pulling money out of, stuffed into their overalls or whatever.
Yeah, which is like weird. Like, why would he be doing that?
Well, I guess it's to show that basically he that his wealth was gained on the tragedies of those men.
Oh, okay,
so, yeah. So let's see. So it's the divine pairing that they're talking about between he and Tandy, between Ty and Tandy, and also that's when and I say it's her mom. It's actually her auntie, her aunt. But that's where she also reveals that one of the two of them is likely to die. I'm with you. I'm assuming that it's Ty. Again, I'll be curious to see how they play it in the show. We get Tyrone then trying to get a job with, I said Martin or Marcus. It's actually Dwayne.
Dwayne.
And like I said, makes the final determination that that Dwayne is actually selling drugs. Now, in this episode, we talk about gratuitous sex. We also get a scene that is actually Dwayne and his girlfriend, who is African American, but African American with a very light complexion. You are definitely momentarily led to at least ask yourself, wait, is this Ty and Tandy? And it is not. It is revealed that it's two different people shortly thereafter. And like I said, we get the whole dance with O'Reilly leading Connors to believe that she is at least shifty, if not dirty. But I believe Connors eventually figures her out. It's still kind of unclear to me who was playing who for what. At the end of the episode, Connors takes O'Reilly to meet Dwayne. He comes in to talk to Dwayne first and tells Dwayne that O'Reilly is going to come through the door in 5 minutes, and then at that point, Dwayne is to shoot her. But when she comes in, Connors yells out something, which I believe tips her off, and she's able to draw down and shoot Dwayne first. So I'm not really sure at this point if Connors' whole plan was to get Dwayne taken out, so that Connors can become the kingpin who runs the drug trade in the Ninth Ward. I don't know, thoughts on scenes, character interactions, and stuff in episode 6?
Yeah, no, that was very interesting, and the also end result of that too was that Tyrone. I think this is the first time. Well, I guess we have that. So, yeah, I think this is the first time somebody outside the two know about their special abilities, right? Because he saw Tyrone teleporting.
Yes, yeah. Although Connors doesn't know what he saw, and I'm certain he won't tell anyone because they're going to think he's absolutely crazy. What impressed me was, to me, this was, as far as I know, this is the first time that Tyrone bamfed at will.
Yeah. Yep. Which was a big event.
Yeah. So I'm so hoping we're over this. This teen angst agonizing over trying to come to grips with their power set. So.
Although it surprises me too, the guy that Tandy stabbed earlier on, like, I mean, I guess like he didn't realize like she could have just had a random knife, but he didn't like catch on that she poofed a knife out of her hand or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, in that situation, he was very close to her and couldn't see down unless he were looking down, and he probably just thought that she had a knife on her. So the boyfriend's name, Tandy's boyfriend's name was Liam. So Dwayne is dead now at the end of this. A large part of this episode is Tandy and her relationship that she's building with Mina Hess.
Which is, that's kind of like a really sad moment, right? Because like she figures out that she was Tandy from the beginning, and she's like, all you have to do is tell me the truth. And she actually gets to meet the dad, and that's, pretty sad because he's in this sad state. I have a feeling that Mina secretly hates the organization, but she's working from the inside to try to change things.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, the thing is, Mina doesn't know. I mean, Mina is clearly sad for Tandy, but I don't. The question is, does Mina know that? I don't know if Ivan ever had a chance to tell her that. I mean, she tells Tandy that Nathan didn't make a mistake. I mean, she specifically says that her dad told her that Nathan Bowen
never made a mistake, right? Yeah.
Never made a bad calculation in his life. So she would know at least that it's not Nathan's fault. She would, I guess, know that it's not her dad's fault. I don't know. I just don't know if she knows that it was malicious, right? That there was actually wrongdoing in the collapse of that rig and the attempted cover-up. So it'd be interesting to see exactly how that goes down. What's funny is, and I need to look it up, so one of the things, I don't think it's Mina Hess, but one of the things that's been going on in the comics the last couple of years is there is a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, I think named Roz, who is like an environmentalist, and like one of her big things is a continuing conflict with the Roxxon organization, and all their bad environmental dealings. So I need to pull the thread and see if Mina is a character in the comics at all. I'm not sure. I may be off base on that, but I'll look that up later. But interesting relationship development between Mina Hess and Tandy Bowen that occupied a large part of the episode. But the most interesting thing is the end to me, where Cloak bamfs as he's bamfing away from Connors, who's attempting to shoot him, and winds up back at the church with Tandy and is crying and sobbing, and Tandy attempts to comfort him, and basically now it seems like whenever they're going to touch that, there's a big static electric kind of shock that repels them. That had me kind of jumping up and standing up and clapping in comic book boy fandom, because that to me is an element directly from the comics, right? One of the tragic stories is that the two of them can't really physically interact because their powers are exact opposites of each other. And the only real thing, contact that they have is that Tandy's power and her view of the world allows her to travel inside Cloak's darkness without being turned crazy like everyone else is. And that's another. Yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting between these two episodes, right? Because they also use the whole she can see the hopes and he can see the fears, and with Ivan, she touches him and she goes to turn that thing and she finds out that it's a fear in that vision. And so it's like, ooh, she says, but I know who can find out what I need to know. So that's interesting that she's going to have to now go back to Tyrone. And I was just looking, I guess we don't see Mina and Ivan after episode 7. So after episode 7, we don't see them for the rest of this season. So whatever they're going to do with those characters will be left with the next episode.
Huh, that's interesting. Well, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I guess it could mean, though, that maybe that's resolved off screen. I mean, that's another possibility. I mean, like, if the season doesn't end, I mean, I guess I feel like this season needs to end with one of two things, right? Either pushing the situation between Tyrone and Connors to a cliffhanger or resolving it, or pushing Tandy's storyline to a cliffhanger or resolving it. But maybe that we get two cliffhangers, right? It's a shortened season. So I don't know. I feel like there's no way in the world that ABC doesn't renew this show.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting.
And how long we're gonna have to wait for the next season, right? Is this going to be like a whole nother year till? I mean,
yeah, I think this is the Marco Polo / Dark Matter thing, right? Where this show is going to run over the summer, while all the other shows are off the air. Yeah, so I'm expecting we'll get a June drop of our premiere of the new season. There was something else that I was just.
It would be kind of cool. I think like predicting it if they ended Tyrone's issue, and then season 2 they finally deal with Roxxon, but maybe they have to get one of the defenders involved. It's like, all right, this threat is too big for us. We're gonna have to get Luke Cage or Iron Fist to help out. And that would be a nice tie-in if they started next year with Marvel, if they came out with their streaming service and they started integrating stuff more.
Yeah, on Disney. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely possible. Again, because I'm not a comic book purist, but I definitely still hearken to the comics, and there are particular characters that I want to see, remain truer to their path than others. I would like this season to end and have them not be in New Orleans anymore, right? Like, I would like them to end in New Orleans and start off next season in New York. So the thing I was going to mention is what we also get in this episode, in episode 6, is we get the first deliberate and offensive use of Cloak's ability to basically drive people mad when the drug runner.
That's right. You're right. Yes.
Grabs the guy's hand, and I thought it was a nice acting out of maybe the effect that happens when he puts you in the cloak, which again for him will become later, but that the reason he's able to drive you mad is that any doors that would present themselves that would allow you to escape from a nightmare vision, he is able to hold closed.
Yeah, which is pretty cool,
right? Which is kind of a very effective visualization of, because in the comics he would wrap you up in the cloak and he would be able to hold you in, like you could see the guy inside like trying to get out, but Cloak would be able to hold the cloak closed and not open it until he so chose. So I thought that was very interesting. I don't know, overall, I mean, do you feel like the show is still on track? Or are you as happy with episodes 5 and 6? You mentioned earlier that kind of there was this internet swell of people who didn't like episode 5.
Yeah, which is weird because I honestly think that 5 and 6 are probably our best episodes since episode 1. Because I feel like we're starting to see a little bit more of Cloak and Dagger now that they've kind of are mastering their abilities, right?
Yeah. So and actually, like I said, there's parts of what's unfolding that I'm kind of getting tired of, and one of those things is I don't need to see the dual track storylines anymore, right? Even though that feels like it's starting to pivot a little bit. I think what you're saying is because I felt the same way is the first 4 episodes we see a lot of them on their own track, incrementally moving forward, and we hit these points where they meet up. It feels like there's slowly growing more and more awareness between the two of what the other is doing. Episode 6, I just want to see them I want to see
Just
them partner
together,
up. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's instead of us both tracking these things individually, let's both work on one thing, right, together. And I'm hoping that's where we proceed from after Tyrone has bamfed into the church, right, and Tandy is unable to comfort him. So I don't know, man. Anything else you want to talk about on these 2 episodes?
Let's see. I think it's kind of unfortunate that we see Dwayne get killed, because I feel like if he got Dwayne to, because he wanted kind of justice for his brother, and if Dwayne went untestified, like, he would have gotten that. And I feel like him seeing Dwayne get killed was like, he feels like there's no hope anymore, right? Because how is he going to ever prove it's going to be a lot harder for him now to make that case.
But yeah, and I think that would be fine because that's a key element of Cloak's. Right? I mean, I'm trying to. I don't remember. I can't remember from the comics which of the 2 of them was the more, kind of if they die kind of approach. Right? I want to say Cloak is the one who feels like, look, at the end of the day, bad people are just bad people. There's nothing that can be done about them, right, except for them to be punished and to have justice meted upon them. So I feel like the path that he's on is the Apache. Yeah, he is the more compassionate and empathetic person right now, and obviously the one who believes that, like, the right things should happen to the right people, whereas Tandy is the one who's street smart and has had to scratch and survive and constantly tells Tyrone that he shouldn't care as much, basically. I feel like we're approaching this. He's on this approach path where he's gonna flip and turn the corner, and he's actually gonna become the one that has the much darker take on the world than Dagger does, which I feel is like how their personalities were represented in the comics. So yeah, it maybe sounds morbid to say I'm looking forward to him hitting that point of despair and kind of becoming the Cloak that I know and still want to see.
Yeah, it'll be good to see. And I kind of want him to, like, stay boyfriend-girlfriend with
Evita?
With Evita, yeah. I don't know. I like that interaction going on.
Yeah. But we do know, right, for him to become Cloak, that's got to have a finite endpoint, right?
Yeah.
And may have actually been a little bit of what her aunt is referring to when, Evita says, but isn't there always a point of no return? Again, she's not talking about the relationship. She's talking about whatever apocalypse is approaching that is harbinged by the arrival of Cloak and Dagger. And her aunt tells her, there's always a point of no return. It's called the end, which I thought was a very tongue-in-cheek thing to say.
That was really good. Yeah, I was like, oh.
Right. But yeah, that could just as much be a referral to the end of their relationship, right, due to whatever it is that Cloak evolves into becoming. All right, man. Well, unless you got anything else, I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Yep.
All right, very cool. So once again, on behalf of the E2KG Network and Mr. Dave Pecci, my name has been Agasically Stamus from Gearworks.com and the E2KG Network channel on YouTube, as well as my gaming channel on YouTube, Rounding Off Infinity. Thanks so much for joining in. We'll be back in another 2 weeks to discuss episodes 7 and 8. I say 2 weeks, that may be like the colloquial 2 weeks. We may tighten it up a little bit since 7 is already out on the street, and 8 will drop next week. So Dave and I will chat about our schedule. We're also working out, what's next for us once Cloak and Dagger are done, as well as some other possible content that we might cover in partnership with potentially new members who might be joining the network. So we will just see how that goes. No promises. Lots of times those things get set up and we're not exactly sure how they're going to land. But in the meantime, please tune right back in here for the next episode of It's Another Thing, where we will continue talking about Cloak and Dagger one of our favorite summertime shows, and a welcome arrival in the wake of the loss of things like Marco Polo and Dark Matter. So, thanks again for joining in. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.